Singer-songwriter and spin instructor, Morgan Weinmeister and I talked about the kinds of music she likes to write and perform, her focus on lyrics, the nature of vulnerability, and the power of specificity to convey the deeper feelings. As people may not connect with the lyric, but they connect with what they know that lyric feels like. And most importantly, that we should never feel like we need to be boxed into one thing. Here's my conversation with Morgan. I really appreciate that you were able to make time to speak with me, Morgan, because you are the second singer.
Okay, cool.
I think you might be the first singer-songwriter that I speak with.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too, so I'm going to dive right in because I did send you some questions.
Yeah,
and
I purposely didn't look at them at all.
Oh,
So I
excellent.
want it to be like totally off the cuff, what I think as it comes out.
Oh, perfect. Okay, because I usually don't follow them, so that's better.
Oh, excellent.
But I was curious to know when you first decided you wanted to become a singer.
I think that that's something that was almost decided for me in the sense that without singing, I don't really think that I'm 100% me. I was 3 years old sitting in the back of my dad's van or truck and singing along to whatever he would be playing. And I just have always done it. And at any given moment, if I'm not singing, like if I'm not humming to myself or singing in the shower, my closest friends and family kind of know that something's off. So I think that it's not something I decided I wanted to be. It's something that I'm blessed enough to just get to do.
So I will say that I met you originally as a spin instructor because I've taken
Right.
your spinning classes, which are excellent. And I think I didn't realize at first that you sang sometimes with the music because you're actually so much in tune with it that I don't hear it. It's not like sometimes you hear people singing, you're like, oh yeah, I can hear you singing over music. You actually don't hear singing over the music because you're actually singing with the music, which was pretty
Right.
impressive.
Yeah, for sure. I remember you saying to me at one point, you were like, I had no idea that you did this. And I'm like, well, the next time you take my class, all you're going to be able to hear now is me singing all of the time. I think it's a crutch that I have when I'm coaching. Like if I'm feeling particularly tired and I want to get my energy up to that next level, singing along to whatever is playing always kind of gets me there and gets me through the moment of feeling exhausted or burnt out.
Well, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so what are some of your favorite types of music to write and to perform? Because those might be different.
You're 100% right on that. When I get to perform live, mostly I sing covers. And I think a lot of that has to do with the kind of original music that I write. The kind of original music that I write doesn't tend to be the things that the average person who's just going out to a bar to hear live music would want to hear. For sure, my family, my friends, the people who follow me love to engage with my original stuff, but a general crowd, they much more prefer the upbeat classic covers. So when I'm performing, I love Alanis Morissette, Janis Joplin, Amy Winehouse. So bluesy, jazzy, but like with a rock and roll kind of flair. I love to really, really show kind of my emotion and like pent up anger and aggression and frustration through the songs that I choose. There is a pattern with the kind of singers I like to cover. They're very lyrically charged and lyrically driven. If you think of like an Alanis Morissette or an Amy Winehouse, oftentimes the crux of their artistry is really in the lyrics that they write. And I really, really have a major respect for that. And that carries over into the music that I really enjoy writing. I don't write a lot of edgy, upbeat bangers, but the creative process for me is really in the lyrics that I get to write. and then the music kind of fills in the space. So when I'm writing, I always really focus on lyrics first, and then the music comes in after. So it's somber, it's soft, it's slower paced, really, really leaves a lot of space for the lyrics.
Okay, so you were saying that you pick the kinds of songs you do to perform because it lets out, there's a certain side of like the edgy anger, more passionate. And so as you're describing the songs you like to write, what is it that you're sharing about yourself through that different style of music?
I think that once again, there's some overlap. I think the reason why the edgier, more upbeat stuff, like I said, works in a more mainstream environment is because it's exactly that. You know, people can clap along or kind of vibe along and move along. And then in my original content that slows way down, there is still this kind of I don't want to say animosity, maybe that's not the right word, but there's deep underlying heavy, sometimes dark, very powerful emotion behind what I write. It's more the musical conception, so how the song will end up sounding, that's not as like there's not really a beat to it. It's way more stripped back, slower pace. But lyrically, I think that's probably why I enjoy performing the songs that I do live versus writing what I write. There is that kind of overlap in terms of content. I have some songs that are sassier than others, some songs that are sadder than others, some that are, you know, way less serious, not as many of them, but some that are really just lighthearted and are just supposed to be fun. But yeah, I would say that that deep, raw emotion kind of carries through in all of the music that I like to either write or perform.
So particularly when you're performing, how does that feel? Like, what does that give you as a performer?
It is probably my life's greatest blessing getting to perform live because it's one thing. And listen, I love singing at the top of my lungs in my car on my own, and it will always be a special kind of therapy to do that. But it's another thing to get to share what you're living with, even if it's a room of four people and two of them are your parents, because that's sometimes been my reality. Two of them are your parents and one is the bartender. You know what I mean? Like, but getting to share in such a raw, open, honest way, but in a way that feels so natural, I think is such a gift. It's not to be the next Taylor Swift by any means, but the experience of sharing is really, really powerful, especially when the content is emotionally charged and you're kind of wearing your heart on your sleeve at any given moment. And when you talk about feeling, for me, it's almost like this state of flow where kind of everything else washes away and you're not really you're aware of your surroundings, but nothing else matters. So that thing that you forgot to do at work, that person you forgot to call, the email that wasn't sent, that thing that's stressing you out, those things that buzz in your head. And I'm somebody who's got a very buzzy head. Just stop and everything else washes away. And so it's peaceful to get to sing live and perform.
I think I'm starting to realize there's something I project onto performers just because, and I realize most of the people I've spoken with are not performing live. So they might be painting or doing photography or writing, and they have so much private space apart from people seeing what they're doing to like perfect it and hone it and
Right.
try it. So the idea of somebody stepping out on stage and saying, "Here I am," and you've got one shot and it's right in front of everybody
Uh-huh.
is for me is overwhelming, and clearly for you is not at all.
I mean, listen, it has been, and it depends on the situation too, right? Like, I always joke about the fact that every time you put me in a new situation, so if it's a new bar, if it's a new time slot, if it's a new night of the week, like something that kind of shakes it up a little bit and that's not the status quo of things that I've gotten to do time and time again, the nerves are always there. So the nerves kind of happen and they bubble up, especially pre-show. But then once I've started and I've gotten into that zone, that's that moment where everything washes away. So I don't want to make it seem like I was always like, I came out of the womb and I was like, I'm ready to entertain. Like, I went through major stage fright. My parents would beg me to sing at family gatherings and things when I was younger, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I couldn't bring myself to do it. I found it really, really difficult. And even now, like I'll give you a concrete example. I sang at one of my friend's weddings a couple of weeks ago, and I sang her first dance. And it's like, poof, talk about no pressure. Like you get one moment. I learned the song specifically for this. So it wasn't a song that I knew and had sang a bunch of times. And you get this one moment with them, and it's like their moment for the rest of their lives. And if something goes wrong, like I know that they would have been fine, but it falls on you, right? And the nerves that night were through the roof. So I think it's also case by case. Once I was a few phrases into the song and things settled into place, once again I got that peace and that well-being and that safety. But oof, leading up to it, I was not in a good place.
It makes me think, because if we layer on another thing on top of that, so I know that this year you performed in a group show. It was Greece. And so you're layering on working with other people. And was there some acting involved, or you're playing a part of, okay, who were you in Greece?
So I was in the ensemble. I was in different scenes throughout the show. So obviously I don't just walk onto the stage and be Morgan. So there is some character work that goes into that. I would say the bigger thing, or something that took up an even larger chunk of my time, was I was lucky enough to assistant vocal direct for that show. So all of the harmonies, all of the arrangements of the entire show from start to finish, I got to build them. So I got to listen to different references, whether it was the original soundtrack with John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John, or the live television performance that they had filmed a couple years back, and go in and really kind of listen for different vocal parts and build up arrangements that felt right to me, and then get to teach them to a cast of about 30 people. So that was an entirely new experience for me. I'd never done anything like it. I loved it. I would love to do more of it. But it's very different working on, first of all, something that's theatrical, like you said, because there's an element of period. It was a period piece in the sense that it's set in the 1950s. There's an element of, well, now you're not one person, you're 30. So you don't want to necessarily sing the loudest so that your voice stands out. You want to blend in so that the harmonies sound really, really nice and put together. A solo show versus a 2.5-hour musical, not the same game at all by any means, but both very, very fun to do for sure.
I know you have an album out on Spotify,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm imagining that every song is its unique individual experience, that you write it and you think about how you would perform it and you sing it, but then assembling an album and saying, like, this is the first of all, that these songs all kind of work together, and then this song is going to come first. And maybe I'm thinking a bit old school, because I obviously grew up in the time when you would put the thing in, it played in the order. I don't know if singers still think that way in terms of people playing an album like that.
100%. I can't speak to everybody else's experience. I can only speak to what I did. And I knew that for this particular piece of work, I wanted every detail to be fleshed out down to the bone, because it was the first big thing that I was going to get to do that was entirely mine, that I had written every lyric of, and that I built from the ground up. Obviously, I had collaborators, I had a sound engineer backing me and all of that, but every detail that went into that record was reflected upon and thought out, and there was hemming and hawing. Should we do it this way? Should we try it this way? Should we include the kick drum? Should we take it out? Should we include it for 3 bars and then take it out on the 4th? Should we do a higher harmony up the octave? Should we do one down the octave too? What if for this one we remove, like, every single thing for 6 tracks was thought of, and I knew I wanted to do it that way, because I knew that when it was out, I wanted it to be exactly what I wanted it to be. So the order was 100% reflected upon. And I even, when it came out, asked the people who were interested in listening to it to take the time to listen to it in order, because it really did follow a flow for me. And when the album was finished, it was the same order for the entire process. I knew the track order. And when the album was done and we were getting ready to put it out, we had one final sit down with myself, my now fiance, his 2 cousins, and my dad, and my sound engineer. And we sat in the studio and we played it from top to bottom, and we listened to the whole thing in order. And I kind of looked around and said, what does everybody think? I kind of like took in people's reactions and I said, I just have one thing. and, and Matt, my sound engineer, goes, what? And I go, the fifth and fourth track. I was like, I think we should switch them. And everybody agreed. And we re-listened to it with the new flow. And they were like, you know what? You will know that when this is out, you called the shots and it's exactly what you wanted to put out.
We're very different, and I'm sure so many ways, but the way you talk about the album, like it doesn't mean I have to control everything, but I need to touch on all the things. I need to understand how all these decisions and how this is turning out, because in the big picture, it has to sort of settle into a vision that makes sense to you, because you're putting that out in the world and your name is on it, and it has to
100%.
reflect that.
Absolutely. There were so many parts of it that I was like, I am not the best suited to make this call, right? Like my producer, and well, he did everything for the record. He built it. I was kind of like the minds and he was the mechanics, right? He was able to put into the computer what I had kind of in my head. And we would try things, and it was never a question of we need to do it how I think it should be. It was more we need to try all of our options and be open to everything. And then I'm going to make the call that I feel is right.
It's a tough call to make sometimes, because you're not like, I think what you're saying is like you're not an expert in all the things, and you can't be an expert in all the things.
No.
But you need to have input once people have made recommendations, because they're the experts in the things, to say, yeah, that resonates with me and that doesn't.
Exactly. There was a lot of, I love that idea, we're going with it. And there was a lot of, oh, you tried that. I'm not sold on it. It's still not clicking with me. We got to try something else, So it was totally dependent on the moment and on the song, and very, very proud with what we ended up putting out.
Well, it takes quite a bit of confidence to be able to feel secure in those choices that you're making as you go along, because they are the experts in the different things.
Yeah.
Did you ever struggle with that? Kind of say, oh no, I'm not sure that I'm the right person to make that call? Or
I think I did. Like, I think I even sometimes said it out loud to Matt. I would be like, I don't even know if I have the right to question this, or sometimes I didn't even know how to verbalize what I was hearing or what I thought we should add or take away. But once I would be able to kind of like pinpoint it, it was a really interesting experience, because through the process, I actually gained so much more confidence in like my musical ear beyond songwriting, because I knew that I could pick up a guitar, come up with some chords, write a melody, and write lyrics. I knew that was something that I had worked on and that I could do, and that came to me not necessarily easily, but came to me naturally. The idea of heading to a computer and producing sounds, whether that be organic or synthesized, like from the computer, or recording stuff, inputting it into the recording software, and then manipulating it to make it sound a specific way, and all of those things was very, very foreign to me. And through this process, I really, really got a boost of confidence, because I would question something, or I would make a call, or I would suggest, well, why don't we try this, or why don't we pull this out? And then Matt, who is the expert in that for sure, would turn to me and say, that's it. Like, that's what we needed to do. Like, and so it was cool to have those moments of, I felt something wasn't quite right. I wasn't sure. I called it, we made the change, and then it was right, So it was a fun experience for sure.
so it's sort of an odd segue, but what if we go from you having built up confidence over the course of that project to, if I asked you for yourself, maybe as an artist and as a person, what does vulnerability mean for you?
Ooh, yeah, that's a loaded question, because there's vulnerability just in your life and how you lead your life. And then there's vulnerability in your art. And I think that there's not many a creative person who doesn't know how to show vulnerability, because I feel like art and being creative and creating something demands you to kind of tap into those vulnerable soft spots of yourself. So for me, vulnerability in my art is saying, crap, that's really personal, but I'm going to write it anyways, right? Oh shit, that really kind of lets them into what I have been through, and it leaves no room for interpretation. It is like noir sur blanc, black on white. This is what I lived, and it wasn't easy, and it was scary and dark and all of those things. And I still wrote it, and I recorded it, and I put it out for the world to hear. Or I'm playing it live to a crowd of people, and I know they're listening to my every word. I think that is incredibly vulnerable, but I also think that it is incredibly powerful to be able to say it's difficult content, but I still feel so inclined to share it. Oftentimes, the most creative people are some of the saddest or the bluest or feel the deepest, have the most big feelings kind of floating around within them. And that's why they need to do something with them, right? So whether it's paint, whether it's write a song or a poem or whatever it may be, they kind of lean into creation to grapple with those vulnerable parts of themselves.
You sparked something when you were describing how, and it's you because you're the lyric person. So you focus on the lyrics. So you end up sharing, if that's your approach to songwriting, you share a lot about your personal details about your life. And something that I think people talk about being true with novels, for example, would be the more personal and the more individual your story, the more it resonates with a broader range of people. And it's almost counterintuitive, but oddly, like the more specific you are, the more people can relate.
100%. It's
interesting
so that you say that, because I remember when the album first came out, people would be writing to me saying they would single out a lyric. They would single out a song, and then they would literally chat me back my own lyrics, something that I'd written. And they would be like, oh my God, this so-and-so, this line like ended me. And it would be the most precise, personal, niche, almost lyric that felt so specific that I was like, nobody's going to be able to relate to this, but I need to write it for me. And it would be the things that people would single out. It was so special to know that those were the things that people were connecting to, and that they were finding a way to connect to things that I thought were so unique to me, but they ended up being universal, which was really, really cool to see.
That is cool. And I don't know what it is about being so specific. I think partly it's either that they relate to the actual detail of it, or there's a level of authenticity that only comes through when you're that detailed, that people feel the feeling under it, and that's what they relate to.
Right.
Because specifically, it may not match exactly the details of what they're going through, but the feeling
I think you're right, because anything else, anything that isn't that, we would call something to the effect of cliche, right?
Yeah.
We would just say, or cheesy or surface level. But I think that's the point. They may not connect with the lyric, but they connect with what they know that lyric feels like.
I will say that I listened to your album many, many, many times on Spotify. No, and it's deeply touching. It is deeply touching. So
thank you.
I was so impressed. And actually, it was interesting for me because I knew you originally from spinning.
Right.
To listen to the album and then connect that to the spin instructor at the front of the room and go, hold on a second, that's the same person? Like, do you feel sometimes that? Well, it's a complexity in who you are, obviously, but for me, I had to kind of like put those together.
Yeah, for sure. I imagine that must be pretty interesting, because obviously I'm me, so I know all the parts of me, the ins and outs of me, but to have this one pillar of myself, which is this bubbly, energetic, fiery spin instructor, singing at the top of her lungs, wooing and clapping and all of those things. And then to hear an album of 6 tracks that is very much not that. And like I said, it leaves nothing left unsaid, right? It's very transparent. And so you kind of have this picture of bubbly, happy-go-lucky and fiery and all of those fun things. And then you're like, holy crap, this person lived all of this and wrote all of this. How can those two things kind of exist? But I think that that's really, really cool, because it shows how complex humanity is. I think for me, the hardest part was having conversations with people like yourself, or women coming up to me at the gym and saying like, are you okay now? Like, is that still going on? Like, are you fine? Like, I care about you, like, blah, blah, blah. And to have to kind of reassure them that it's okay, everything's fine, we're good, life is better now, but yes, it was a time, and those have been interesting conversations to have, and I didn't think that I would have them, but interesting and fun nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot, actually. And it's on us to be open to the full spectrum of what every human being is. And the fact that you show those different sides and that they're both out in public, really, that you put that out in front of people is incredible. And I think that's a great model for us to follow. We all have these different components or facets to who we are.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's pressure to focus on, okay, this is this environment and I'm going to show this part of myself, or worst case, like here's everybody. I'm only going to show this part to everybody, and the whole rest of myself I'm going to hold back.
Yeah.
And you don't do that.
Well, I think, and I imagine you might agree with me on this, like I think there's something really freeing about being the one to, for lack of a better term, air out your own dirty laundry, because it puts so much power in your own hands, because it's like, well, nobody's going to talk about it. I did. I said everything that I could say. So if anybody wants to speculate about my shitty ex or my toxic relationship, there's no speculation needed. Like, here it is for you on a silver platter. Feel free to listen from start to finish. It'll cost you about 22 minutes of your time, right? So that is very, very empowering, especially given the content of the lyrics, of coming out of this really, really tumultuous situation, being able to make something that you're proud of, that you find beautiful, and say, here, like, this is what I lived. And yeah, then it's like nobody gets to talk about it or speculate, or they can if they want, but your story is out there and you got to tell it the way you wanted to tell it. We're very complex, right? Like, just as human beings and as people, and you don't have to be locked into one facet of yourself. You can be the bubbly spin instructor and be the girl that really went through, the ringer at a certain point. And both things are equally part of your story and your journey, and one doesn't outweigh the other. It just contributes to the depth of who you are. And I think that we all have our own little facets, right? I'm saying spinning and music, but I'm sure yours is a different concoction and somebody else's might be something completely different. So not to feel like you need to be boxed into one thing.
You can follow Morgan on Instagram at Morgan Weinmeister. Also be sure to listen to her music on Spotify, starting with the album Bruises and Bellyaches. And if you find yourself in Montreal, sign up for one of Morgan's spin classes so you can connect the dots between instructor and singer-songwriter.